Hello there, I'm Sculptcat, and today I've chosen to make my own interpretation of a beholder from Dungeons and Dragons. Make sure to stick around until the end to see the final result. Alright, let's do this. Like usual, I start off with a healthy amount of tinfoil. Because a beholder is shaped like a tennis ball, I won't be needing any wire for the main body. I also made sure to leave enough space for the mouth too. I think Super Sculpey will always be my favourite clay. I have been using it for 3 years. All I did here was just roll out enough clay to put over the foil ball I made. To make sure the clay sticks on well, I used my ancient tube of clay glue and brushed it all over. I then wanted to build up some clay for where the eyes were going to be. However, my plans were foiled by my cat once again. Sometimes I think she has something against my sculpting. The mouth didn't have enough of a gap in it, so I spent some time going back and forth to make it bigger. Really, she does have something against me. Again, using my larger ball tool, I made the eye socket. I wanted the beholder to have a raised area around the eye, so I blended some extra clay around the socket. As it looks a little too surprised, I caved in the top so it looks more angry as well. When making the tentacles, I cut 10 pieces of wire and bent them all in the direction that I wanted, as well as coating them all with clay. I ended up putting that on hold to make the eyes. Cabochons are one of my favourite sculpting ingredients because they can make very realistic looking eyes. I got 10 tiny ones and one big one, and got out my yellow, red, green and blue paints. I started by painting all of the pupils black, and then went in with a darker version of each colour to create the small lines that will make it look more real. I decided to make 4 yellow, 3 green and 3 blue eyes, as well as making the main one red. On the main eye, I was able to make the smaller lines cleaner and more delicate as I had more space to work with. I also used 2 shades of red for the back to give it more variation. I then went back to finish the tentacles and added the eyes on after. I added small balls on the ends of the tentacles to create enough space for the eyes. When securing down the tentacles, I did remove some around each one just to create extra space for my hands and tools. I only used a small line of clay to secure each one. For the main eye, all I had to do was smush down the clay to hold it in place, as well as adding some extra clay for the eyelid. I also added another line of clay so it looks even angrier. And here's another brand of clay that I'm not sponsored by, Cosclay. I use this to create the teeth, as even after it's been baked it can still move a little, so the teeth are less likely to break. I did this a little differently than I usually do, as I pre-made a bunch of teeth and baked them so I could put them in while they were hard. While the teeth were in the oven, I also made the tongue by shaping some clay into the form I wanted and blended it into the mouth using my silicone tools, or as I like to call them, my mini fingers. I did a similar process for the gums. After the teeth have been baked, it's time to add them on using my prehistoric tube of clay glue. All I did was shove them in kind of a random order, starting with the bigger teeth. As the face was looking a little bland, I started adding small spikes to the face, using my mini fingers to blend them in. I may have gone slightly overboard. To detail the tongue and the inside of the mouth, I used my not so round ball tool to scratch some fleshy looking details. I also added some lines on the gums to make them look scratched. This part was definitely my least favourite. I used my spiky tool to make rounds along each of the tentacles. It was mostly hard just because they kept moving out of place. Like on the gums, I went along each tentacle and scratched in these little lines to give it more texture. I wanted the beholder to look old and worn, so I carved out chunks of clay along the lips and around the eyes so it looks wrinkly as well as scarred. As I imagine beholders having to stretch their mouths very wide, I added scarred slits to the corners of the mouth to make it look like it's opened its mouth a little too far. On the facial spikes, I made small lines running up them, again similar to what I did with the gums. I felt as if the back didn't really have enough going on, so I added lines of clay across it to look like little veins. I also added small balls to give it more form and to act as sort of spots. Here comes one of my favourite parts, which I call hitting the clay with my ball tool until it looks textured enough. The raised spot's a little harder to give it some variation. Again, I carve little lines into the veins. After I put it in the oven to bake, I started painting. Though this looked like a black, it was actually a very, very dark purple. The best thing about cabochons is that no matter how much paint you get on them, you can always just scratch it off. For the scarred areas, I used a lighter shade of purple to make them stand out like a scar actually would. I used a light pink for the base coat on the gums, which eventually got much darker from the other coats. To dry brush, all you need to do is get a different colour on your brush and wipe most of it off. The excess will then transfer to the raised areas of your sculpture, leaving the carved in textures. I did this over the gums, scars and the entire main body in lighter shades. For the body, I just used a bluish purple. I also used a much lighter shade of purple for the ends of the tentacles as well. As I wanted the spikes to stand out from the rest of the face, I dry brushed a dark red over the ends of them, as well as around all of the eyes, including the eyes on each tentacle. I also used it for the veins on the back. For the mouth, again I just used red. While the paint was still wet, I went in and blended some black around the gums and the back of the mouth for a shading effect. And then for the tongue, I used a dark magenta. When painting the teeth, I started with a much darker cream kind of colour. I had to be delicate as I didn't want to get any of this on the gums. And then for some variation, I created a gradient by dry brushing some white onto the ends. To remove the paint from the cabochons, I use a toothpick to get rid of the majority, and then I go in after with my spiky tool to get up right into the edges. The bar holder is complete. I really appreciate you sticking around for so long to see the end result. I really encourage you to make one yourself even if you've never sculpted before. Again, thank you so much for your support, and if you enjoyed the video, a like would be greatly appreciated, and if you want to see more in the future, I recommend subscribing. Thank you!